Hello, my name is Carol Brown, and I'm the director of the Sioux Spiritual Center near Howe, South Dakota. I'm delighted to be with you, the Catholic Daughters, today. Just a little bit about the background here. The real name of the center is Mapia Namaka Okogna, which means between heaven and earth. For those of you who haven't heard of it, it's a beautiful little log cabin retreat center that was built by the Jesuits in the 1970s to support the special spiritual needs of Native American Catholics. And for 40 years, the Jesuits ran this place as a place of formation and prayer. Primarily, it served Native Americans for the first 40 years of its existence. And then in 2017, the Jesuits decided that they were no longer going to be able to staff some of the apostolates that they were leading, vocations crisis and all. And it turned out that the Sioux Spiritual Center was one of the apostolates that they were no longer going to be staffing. So management of the center went back to the Diocese of Rapid City, and I was hired as the director of the Sioux Spiritual Center. I'm not Sioux myself, I'm not Native myself, I'm plain vanilla. But it's been an absolute joy to work here. And the diocese has decided to open it up for everyone. So this little gem is also available to you for group retreats, personal retreats. We have recovery retreats, inner healing prayer retreats, life in the spirit retreats, Ignatian retreats. We're working on a grief retreat. And next fall, we're very excited. You may have heard about this already, but we're very excited that we're going to be launching the Covenant School of Spiritual Direction. We'd love to have the Catholic Daughters out for a day or a weekend or whatever way we can serve you, so please keep us in mind. Anyway, I've been asked to speak with you today a little bit about servant of God, Nicholas Black Elk. He, of course, is a Lakota man who hopefully is going to be named a saint. There are several steps to that process of becoming a saint. First of all, a holy life, obviously. But the one that he's on now is that he's been named servant of God. And if all goes well, the next step will be that he'll be beatified, and we'll start calling him Blessed Nicholas Black Elk. And then the final step is canonization, and then we'll start calling him Saint Nicholas Black Elk. So hopefully that goes through. I believe that would make him our third Native American saint after Saint Kateri Tekakwitha and Saint Juan Diego. So this is a very exciting thing for the Diocese of Rapid City. So I want to tell you a little bit about him today. What we know about Black Elk came first through an interview that Black Elk gave to a gentleman named John Neihart. Neihart wanted to get a snapshot of what Indian life was like before the settlers came and before Christianity impacted the Native people. So he met with Black Elk and he took an extensive interview with him, and he wrote a book from it that was called Black Elk Speaks, and it was published in 1932. And this is what we know about him. So Black Elk was born in eastern Wyoming in the year 4 crows were killed. Which year would that be? Well, we're not exactly sure, but the best estimates we have put it at around 1863. What we learned about Black Elk was that he was present at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He was there at Custer's Last Stand as a teenager. And he was also present at the Wounded Knee tragedy in 1890 that left 150 Lakota people dead. So he really was a witness to some of the major events, historical events in our state history. I remember reading that book in college and being very moved by the injustice that was inflicted on these people. Neihart paints a picture of Black Elk as kind of a sad old man at the end of his life, standing up on the high point of the Black Hills, what we call Black Elk Peak, grieving a way of life that was disappearing and offering prayers for restoration. In fact, Neihart doesn't tell us anything about Black Elk's life after 1890, and he still had 60 years to go at that point. He didn't die until 1950. Neihart's goal was a worthy one. He wanted to catch a snapshot. But the truth was that Black Elk wasn't sad, and he wasn't near the end of his life in 1890, certainly, and he actually never did utter the prayer that Neihart put on his lips. Neihart took some poetic liberties in the telling of the story, which means he fabricated some of the facts. And he doesn't tell the story at all that's most interesting to us. And that is the part that leads the Diocese of Rapid City to put Black Elk forth as a Catholic man of heroic virtue and possibly worthy of being named a saint. So in the early 1970s, a young man named Michael Steltenkamp came out to Pine Ridge. He'd read Black Elk Speaks, and because of it, he became interested in Native spirituality. He'd been raised Catholic, but he was somewhat disenchanted, and he took his quest for spiritual wisdom to the Lakota. So he ends up getting a job teaching at Pine Ridge at the Red Cloud Indian School. And one afternoon, after school, he went outside to smoke a cigarette. And lo and behold, there was a divine appointment that had been arranged. Outside the school was a lady named Lucy Looks Twice, waiting for her grandkids to get out of school. And they started talking, and he finds out that she is the daughter of Nicholas Black Elk. And of course, this really caught Michael's attention. So he asked if he could visit her. He wants to find out more about this Black Elk that he'd been reading about. And what he learned was fascinating. It turns out that Neihart's book, Black Elk Speaks, was an incomplete story of her father's life and thought. Remember, Neihart only wanted one thing. He wanted to get a snapshot of what Native life was like before the white people came. The book did not address what she considered to be the most important part of his life, which was his conversion to Catholicism and his life as a Catholic catechist. So let's dig into his life a little bit. As I mentioned before, the best guess that we have at Black Elk's birth year was 1863. But as I mentioned, it would have been before the arrival of the settlers. So he had experienced the nomadic way of tribal life, and he experienced the enormous cultural disruption that came with westward expansion. As a child, he experienced a serious illness. He was about 9 years old, and this illness put him into a coma, 12 days. And while he was in this coma, he has this spiritual vision that affected him really deeply. It's a really long vision, full of symbolism, Lakota symbolism. I'm not going into all the details, but I just want to draw out a couple points that struck me as being important. One part of the vision, little Black Elk was given a cup of water. And he says, with the cup of water, I was to save mankind. This water was clear, and with it, I was to raise a nation. What does that make you think of? For me, it made me think of baptism. When Black Elk later became a catechist, he baptized more than 400 people. Another point, at a certain point in this vision, he was told that he was to be a holy man, and that this was the way that he would save men. That seems significant in the way that his life eventually unfolded, and the fact that he indeed is now being considered for sainthood, and that his life and his example have led so many to the faith, seems like that word was prophetic. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so let's back up. I said earlier that Black Elk was present at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, or sometimes it's called Custer's Last Stand. He was a teenager, about 13 years old, in June of 1876 when that happened. 10 years later, around the age of 23, 1886, he joins Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show. Sitting Bull had done this a year earlier. And Black Elk was on a quest. He wanted to understand white man's ways. So this, joining of this company was going to take him all over the world, going to take him across the country and also to Europe. And but in order to join the show, he had to be baptized. So he was baptized in the Episcopal Church, not because he had any faith or any belief in it, but he wanted to go along with everybody. So he traveled with the show throughout the United States and Europe. And in Europe, of course, he would have experienced the churches. I'm sure they must have struck him with great awe. He danced for the Queen of England. As the story goes, he also met a young woman and he fell in love. We don't have a lot of details about that, but apparently he got sick for a time. He was taken care of by her family, and don't know much more about it after that. Anyway, at some point, Black Elk began to get homesick, and he was 27 when he came home. And of course, the next year after that was the Wounded Knee tragedy. Now, during that time, there was kind of a cult going through the native peoples. There was a man named Wovoka from out in the Utah area who had this, I don't know if you'd call it a prophetic word or what exactly, but he was promoting something called the ghost dance. And he said that if people would do the ghost dance and wear these ghost shirts, the shirts would be bulletproof, the dead would come back to life, the buffalo would come back, and the white people would go away, and they go back to their happy way of life. And so the people were at that point so discouraged with how things were going that, obviously they wanted something good to happen, and so it was it was an attractive idea, and so many people were caught up in this ghost dance. I don't want to call it a religion. It was Marlon Leno, who used to be the director of Native Ministries, told me it was kind of like a cult. And so anyway, Black Elk was involved in that. And what would happen would be that they would dance, and it was a very intense physical experience. They would basically work themselves into a trance, and Black Elk did that. And during one of these dance trances, he had another vision, and I think it's really, really striking. I'm actually going to read part of it to you here, and you can find out about this in the Sixth Grandfather. This is the basically the transcribed notes that were taken when that interview was being done with Mr. Neihart. And I would say it's like a Christological vision. So anyway, again, the vision is quite long and intense, and I don't understand all of it, but anyway, it says during part of this vision, it says, I saw 12 men coming toward me, and they stood before me and said, Our Father, the two-legged chief you shall see. Then I went to the center of the circle with these men, and there again I saw the tree in full bloom. Against the tree I saw a man standing with outstretched arms. As we stood close to him, these 12 men said, Behold him. The man with outstretched arms looked at me, and I didn't know whether he was white or Indian. He did not resemble Christ. He looked like an Indian, but I was not sure of it. He had long hair, which was hanging down loose. On the left side of his head was an eagle feather. His body was painted red. And he says here, at that time I had never had anything to do with white men's religion, and I had never seen any picture of Christ. Now, I'm not sure if he was mixing up his timing or what, but he had been to Europe. So, whether that was an important influence on this or not. But he says at this point he had never seen a picture of Jesus. Anyway, this man said to me, My life is such that all earthly beings that grow belong to me. My Father has said this. You must say this. I stood there gazing at him and tried to recognize him. I could not make him out. He was a nice-looking man. As I looked at him, his body began to transform. His body changed into all colors, and it was very beautiful. All around him there was light. Then he disappeared all at once. It seemed as though there were wounds in the palms of his hands. Then those 12 men said to me, Turn around and behold your nation. Your nation's life is such. And there's more to the story. There's more to the story, but I'm just struck by this really Christological vision. You have a man with wounds in his hands and feet, stretched out against a tree, covered in red or blood. Anyway. But Black Elk wasn't a Christian yet at this point, and he thought about that a lot. That vision remained with him for a long time, and so at that time he was practicing as a medicine man, and was very much engaged in the Lakota prayers, Lakota religion, and he was called one day to help out with a little boy was dying. So I'd like to read to you just a little bit of that story. This is from Michael Steltenkamp's book about it. This is what happened the day that encounter came about. It says, family members found Black Elk's account both informative and amusing. For them, it was not a commentary on the confrontation of medicine men with missionary, but more the story of how their loved one became a catechist through the intervention of someone who became the family's respected friend, Father Joseph Lindebner. Black Elk's daughter Lucy provided the only account of her father's conversion experience, which occurred when he was in his late 30s. And this is Lucy now talking. She said, he walked over there. This was at this family's house with the little boy who was dying. He says he walked over there carrying his medicine. At that time, they walked those long trails if they didn't have a horse. When he got there, he found the sick boy lying in a tent, so right away he prepared to doctor him. My father was really singing away, beating his drum, when along came one of the black robes, Father Lindebner. And then they have a Lakota name for him here, Ate Tek- Tekala. Father Lindebner had already baptized the boy and had come to give him the last rites. He took whatever my father had prepared and threw it all into the stove. Then he took my father by the neck and said, "Satan, get out." Father then administered the boy communion and the last rites, and he also cleaned up the tent and prayed with the boy. He came out and saw my father sitting there looking downhearted and lonely, as though he lost all his powers. Next thing Father Lindebner said was, "Come on, get in the buggy with me." My father was willing to go along, so he got in, and the two of them went back to Holy Rosary Mission. Father told the Jesuit brothers to clean him up, give him some clothes, underwear, shirt, suit, tie, shoes, a hat. They fed him and gave him a bed to sleep in. My father never talked about that incident, but he felt it was our Lord that appointed or selected him to do the work of the black robes. He wasn't bitter at all. He stayed at Holy Rosary for 2 weeks preparing for baptism. He gladly accepted the faith on December 6, 1904, and he became a convert and started working for the missionaries. He put all his medicine practice away. He never took it up again. So, significant event in the life of Black Elk. By that time they had gone a long ways in learning to understand the Lakota language, and so they were able to catechize him in his own language and put before him the story of from the beginning, from Adam and Eve all the way to Jesus, and invite him to say yes to Jesus. And so when he said yes to Jesus, then he was baptized, and he really became a missionary disciple. And it's a powerful example for us. He became Catholic on the Feast of St. Nicholas, 1904. And that's why he took the name Nicholas. After that, he eventually was formed enough that he took on the ministry of catechist, and he went all over these several state area, bringing the Two Roads Catechism to people. And we have a picture of him teaching children with the Two Roads Catechism. He baptized over 400 people. He also had an interesting side life. He was a friend of Gutzon Borglum, who built Mount Rushmore. He did the Duhamel Indian pageant, which was a respectful showcasing of traditional Lakota religion. And in 1934, Black Elk wrote out his own testimony of faith, and I'd like to read it to you. This is on file, by the way, with the Bureau of Catholic Indian Missions, and you can read it for yourself on page 59 of the Sixth Grandfather. So, here we go. This is at the Holy Rosary Mission, Pine Ridge, South Dakota, January 26, 1934. I shake hands with my white friends. Listen, I will speak words of truth. I told about the people's ways of long age, and some of this a white man put in a book, but he did not tell about current ways. Therefore, I will speak again, a final speech. Now, he lived for another, 16 years after this, so it wasn't really a final speech. And he's referring, by the way, to Neihart's book. He didn't tell the most important part of the story. So he says, "Now I am an old man. I called my priest to pray for me, and so he gave me extreme unction and the Holy Eucharist. Therefore, I will tell you the truth. Listen, my friends. For the last 30 years, I have lived very differently from what the white man told about me. I am a believer. The Catholic priest, Short Father, baptized me 30 years ago. From then on, they have called me Nick Black Elk. Very many of the Indians know me. Now I have converted and live in the true faith of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Accordingly, I say in my own Sioux Indian language, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, as Christ taught us and instructed us to say. I say the Apostles' Creed, and I believe it all. I believe in the 7 sacraments of the Catholic Church. I have now received 6 of these: baptism, confirmation, penance, Holy Eucharist, Holy Matrimony, and extreme unction. For very many years, I went with the several priests to fight for Christ among my people. For about 20 years, I helped the priests, and I was a catechist in several communities. So I think I know more about the Catholic religion than many white men. For 8 years, I participated in the Retreat for Catechists, and from this I learned a great deal about the faith. I am able to explain my faith. From my faith, I know who I believe in, so my work is not in vain. All of my family is baptized. All my children and grandchildren belong to the Catholic Church. And I'm glad of that, and I wish very much that they will always follow the holy road. I know what St. Peter has to say to those men who forsake the holy commandments. My white friends should read it carefully. 2 Peter 2:20-22. I send my people on the straight road that Christ's church has taught us about. While I live, I will never fall from faith in Christ. 30 years ago, I knew little about the one we call God. At that time, I was a very good dancer. In England, I danced before our grandmother, Queen Victoria. At that time, I gave medicines to the sick. Perhaps I was proud. I considered myself brave, and I considered myself to be a good Indian. But now I think I'm better. St. Paul also became better after his conversion. I know that the Catholic religion is good, better than the sun dance or the ghost dance. Long ago, the Indians performed such dances only for glory. They cut themselves and caused the blood to flow. But for the sake of sin, Christ was nailed on the cross to take our sins away. The Indian religion of long ago did not benefit mankind. The medicine men sought only glory and presence from their curing. Christ commanded us to be humble, and he taught us to stop sinning. The Indian medicine man did not stop sin. Now I despise sin, and I want to go straight in the righteous way that the Catholics teach us, so my soul will reach heaven. This is the way I wish it to be. With a good heart, I shake hands with all of you. Signed, Nick Black Elk, and then also signed by his daughter, Lucy Looks Twice, and Joseph A. Zimmerman, S.J. So that's the testimony that he gives us of his Catholic faith. Sounds pretty solid. One other kind of cool bit of information is that Black Elk passed away finally in 1950. And he said beforehand that he felt that there was going to be a great display in the sky on the night that he died. And there was an incredible shower of falling stars. And it wasn't just seen here locally, but it was noted actually in newspapers by scientists and astronomers from across the country. And you can read about that on page 201 of Michael Steltenkamp's book. As far away as Moline, Illinois, they reported aurora on 2 successive nights. August 18th, very active display, lasted for 4 hours. And then there was more activity observed August 19th when the entire sky was covered with rayed bands. These met to form a corona, brilliant with rapid pulsations. The landscape was as bright as with the moon. From Toronto, Ontario, the night of August 19th and 20th will be remembered for a long time. A brilliant display of northern lights was seen from practically all regions of the province. The display was the best seen in many years. At times the whole sky was filled with the shimmering, darting forms. So, anyway, kind of special that the Lord gave that beautiful display when he welcomed Nicholas Black Elk home. So, Black Elk is buried in Manderson, so if you ever want to visit his grave, that's a possibility. Anyway, that's at least a taster of what we can know about Nicholas Black Elk. You may want to do some of your own study. I would encourage you to get a hold of Michael Steltenkamp's book. By the way, Michael Steltenkamp, the disenchanted young man who came out to Pine Ridge and met Lucy Looks Twice, must have had a conversion of his own because he's now a Jesuit priest. And he's written this book, Nicholas Black Elk, Medicine Man, Missionary, Mystic. And that's a good book to get a hold of the basic story of Nicholas Black Elk. If you want a more detailed version of what was told to Neihardt, I would not recommend so much reading Black Elk Speaks, because as I told you, he fabricated some stories whole cloth. But the actual interview was actually transcribed. He had a daughter who did shorthand, and so that interview you find in the 6th Grandfather, if you're interested. And there's some interesting information in there as well. Yeah, so that's what I have to share with you today about Nicholas Black Elk. I hope and pray that he does become a great saint, and that all of us can be blessed by his prayers and by his example. So thank you for letting me share this day with you. I have enjoyed putting this together and hope to meet many of you someday here at the Sioux Spiritual Center. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.